I used to laugh at the thought of corn mazes. They were something parents dragged their kids into after pumpkin picking, or a place for teenagers to take pictures and post spooky season online. Nothing more than a fun distraction in the middle of fall. That's what I thought, anyway, before the maze swallowed me. It was late October, the kind of crisp afternoon that makes you feel alive just breathing. My friends bailed on me last minute, saying the maze was lame, but I'd already bought my ticket. I figured, why not? It'd be a nice walk, something quiet, just me and the smell of dry corn and earth. At the entrance, I watched families laughing as kids dashed ahead, their sneakers kicking up dust. A group of teenagers dared each other to sprint into the maze and jump out at strangers. Everything felt safe, normal. The woman at the ticket booth gave me a flimsy paper map that was supposed to guide me through. She winked and said, "Don't get lost in there. The maze has a mind of its own." I chuckled politely and slipped it in my pocket without unfolding it. I didn't need a map. I had a good sense of direction. Or so I thought. At first, the maze felt exactly how I expected. The path wound lazily between towering walls of corn, the stalks dry and brittle, their tassels rattling when the breeze picked up. I dragged my fingers along the leaves as I walked, enjoying the crisp sound they made. The smell of soil was strong, and for a while, it was almost peaceful. But after a couple of turns, the air changed. It got quieter. The family's laughter and the shouts of kids faded until it was just my footsteps on the packed dirt. The breeze stopped, and the stalks no longer moved. Everything felt heavier. I reached a fork and turned left, only to find the path narrowing, darker somehow, as though the sun couldn't quite reach me anymore. No problem, I thought. I just looped back. But when I turned around, the fork wasn't there. Instead, there was a wall of corn. I stopped dead, staring at it. My brain scrambled to explain it. Maybe I'd gotten mixed up. Maybe I hadn't come from that way at all. But no, I knew I had. I remember dragging my hand on the left side of the stalks, the way the tassels had brushed my shoulder. It was gone. The path had closed behind me. My pace quickened. I tried another corner, then another. But every time I turned, the maze shifted. Paths sealed off. New ones opened where they hadn't been before. I pulled out the map. Finally. It was useless. The lines drawn on paper didn't match anything around me. Even worse, the paper itself seemed smudged, the ink faintly blurred, like the walls of the maze had seeped into it. That's when the whispers started. Soft at first, almost like the breeze returning, but too deliberate, too rhythmic. I couldn't make out words, just a chorus of sounds all around me, rising and falling, like a language I wasn't meant to understand. I spun around, heart hammering. Nobody was there, just endless rows of corn. I told myself it was in my head, that I'd just been walking too long, but my hands were shaking. The hours dragged on. My phone had no signal, my water bottle empty. Every path looked the same yet wrong, just different enough to keep me off balance. I tried to push through the stalks, desperate for a straight shot out, but they wouldn't give. The corn was impossibly dense, woven together like a wall of rope. The dry leaves cut my arms and face, as if punishing me for trying. At some point, I realized I wasn't hearing other people anymore. Not a single laugh, not a single voice. The maze was full when I entered. Now, it was just me. Or maybe not, just me. Because once, when I rounded a corner too fast, I caught a glimpse of something slipping out of sight. A tall shadow between the stalks. It didn't look like a person. Its movements were too fluid, too quick. The whispers grew louder when I was near it, pressing in from all sides, like the corn itself was leaning closer to listen. By nightfall, I'd stopped trying to escape. My legs ached, my throat burned from thirst, and the shifting paths made every step feel pointless. I sank down against the dirt, the stalks towering above me like prison bars. That's when I heard the footsteps. Not mine, not an animal's, heavy and deliberate. They circled me just beyond the walls, moving in rhythm with the whispers. I don't know how long I sat there, too afraid to breathe, listening as something unseen traced my every move. The maze doesn't want me to leave. I don't know if it ever lets anyone leave. And if it does, what's waiting at the exit? might be worse. I always thought scarecrows were harmless. Creepy, sure, but only in that Halloween decoration kind of way. A stuffed coat, a burlap sack for a face, maybe a straw hat tossed on top. Nothing more than fabric and straw, just there to spook crows and entertain tourists. But I'll never look at one the same way again. Not after the maze. It was supposed to be a seasonal thing. Pumpkin patches, hay rides, hot cider, and of course, the big corn maze they advertised every year. I went late in the evening, just as the sky turned the color of rust, because I thought it'd be fun to see it in the dark with a flashlight. The air was already cooling off, the stalks rattling softly in the breeze. I could see lanterns glowing faintly at the entrance, and I figured they'd set up props inside the maze. Fake skeletons, spooky decorations, maybe even actors jumping out for cheap scares. Sure enough, just a few turns in, I spotted a scarecrow. It stood at a junction where 3 paths split off, its head tilted slightly, a floppy hat drooping low over its face. A plaid shirt hung from its shoulders, stuffed with straw that poked out at the sleeves. Its burlap sack head had a crude smile stitched across it, and button eyes stared blankly ahead. It wasn't frightening exactly, just unsettling. I passed it and chose the left path. A few minutes later, I came to another split, and there it was again. Same hat, same crooked smile, same torn sleeve with straw sticking out. I froze. No, it had to be a different one. Maybe the maze designers reused the same props throughout, but something about the way it leaned, the exact tilt of its head, it was identical. I shook it off, told myself I was imagining things, and kept moving. But it happened again, and again. Every time I reached a new fork, a scarecrow was waiting. Always the same one. Always closer. The first time it was several feet off the path, propped on a wooden stake. Second time, it was right at the corner, as if it had moved to meet me. By the 4th or 5th encounter, I was sure its arms weren't spread out anymore. They were hanging at its sides, like it had climbed down. My skin prickled with sweat despite the cold. I tried to double back, but the maze had shifted on me. Where I expected one of the earlier paths, there was only a wall of corn. My flashlight beam jittered as my hand trembled, sweeping across the stalks. That's when I saw it again, just ahead, closer than before. The button eyes caught the light for a second, like they reflected it. The stitched smile seemed wider now, sagging at the corners in a way that looked wrong. I turned and ran. The corn whipped at my arms as I stumbled down random turns, my boots crunching on the dirt, my lungs burned. I didn't stop until I thought I'd put enough distance between myself and it. But when I rounded another corner, there it was, only a few feet away, standing in the middle of the path. Its head tilted further than seemed possible, the stitched grin straining against the burlap, and I swear I saw it breathe just once, the fabric of its chest rising slightly, like straw shifting inside. The whispers started then, soft at first, like dry leaves brushing together, but they grew louder as I stared at the scarecrow, rising and falling, like 100 hushed voices. I couldn't understand the words, but they filled the air, pressing into my ears, my skull. The scarecrow twitched. Not a big movement, just the jerk of a shoulder, the crook of an arm, like a marionette tugged by invisible strings. That broke me. I turned and bolted, no thought of direction, just the animal instinct to flee. I don't know how long I ran, or how many wrong turns I made. My legs ached, my throat felt like sandpaper, and the flashlight flickered as the battery started to die. And still, it kept finding me. Always at the next turn, always closer, never making a sound, just waiting, watching, following. I don't remember how I made it out. One moment, I was surrounded by endless walls of corn, the whispers building to a roar in my head. The next, I stumbled forward into the open air of the parking lot. People stared as I collapsed onto the gravel, gasping, clutching my knees. They asked if I was okay, but I couldn't answer. My voice was gone, scraped raw from breathing so hard, from screaming without realizing it. When I finally looked back, the maze was silent, empty. The entrance gate swayed in the wind, but I know what I saw. And sometimes when I close my eyes at night, I swear I still hear the whisper of straw shifting just outside my window. There's a moment in every maze where you stop having fun. At first, it's exciting. You joke with your friends, laugh at wrong turns, maybe even sprint ahead to spook someone at the next corner. But eventually, if you stay in long enough, the laughter fades, and you realize just how easy it is to feel trapped. That moment hit me in the corn maze. Only, what I felt wasn't just being lost. It was something worse, something alive. It started subtly. The stalks rattled faintly as I passed, their dry leaves brushing together like fingers. I thought it was the wind, but then I noticed the air was still. No breeze. The sound only came when I moved, almost in rhythm with my steps, like the corn was exhaling softly as I walked by. Whispers. That's what it sounded like. Dozens of voices whispering from every direction. I slowed down, listening hard, but the moment I stopped moving, the sound stopped too. Silence. My heart thudded louder in my ears than the world around me. I told myself it was nerves, a trick of the acoustics. I kept going. That was when the maze started to breathe. At first, I thought my eyes were playing tricks. The walls seemed to lean in just slightly, as though the stalks were swaying in an invisible current. The path grew tighter, narrower. When I brushed against the leaves, they weren't stiff and dry anymore. They felt warm, like skin. I pulled my hand back and stared. The stalks bent toward me, stretching, their tassels curling down like grasping fingers. Then I heard it, a long, low sigh rolling through the maze. It wasn't the sound of wind moving through plants. It was deeper, the sound of lungs emptying. The corn was breathing. Panic gripped me. I spun around to retrace my steps, but the path behind me was gone. The stalks had closed in, weaving together into a wall. I backed away, chest tightening, and the wall pressed forward, the leaves brushing against my jacket like they were feeling me, testing me. I bolted forward. The roads shifted as I ran, bending and curving, forcing me down paths I didn't choose. Every turn funneled me deeper. The whispers grew louder, sinking with my ragged breaths, until I felt like the corn was inhaling when I inhaled, exhaling when I exhaled, mocking me. And then came the pulsing. The ground beneath my boots rose and fell in slow, rhythmic waves, like the dirt itself was a chest rising with each breath. I stumbled, clutching the stalks for balance, and felt them twitch under my fingers. They were alive. All of it. The maze wasn't just in the field. The maze was the field. It was awake, and it wanted me. I don't remember how long I ran. Minutes, hours. Time bled away inside that living labyrinth. The walls pressed closer, the paths squeezing narrower, until I had to turn sideways to fit through. The corn sighed around me, each exhale hot against my skin. My flashlight beam shook wildly, catching glimpses of shapes in the stalks, faces, maybe, or the suggestion of them, pressed into the fabric of leaves, features stretched and distorted, mouths open in silent screams. I think they were the others, the ones who never found their way out. The maze didn't just trap them, it swallowed them. When I finally stumbled into the open air of the parking lot, dawn was breaking. My clothes were torn, my arms and neck covered in cuts from thrashing stalks. People were just arriving, families smiling, kids running toward the entrance. They looked at me strangely, but no one stopped me as I staggered to my car. No one seemed to notice that the maze behind them was moving, breathing, like it was waiting for the next person to wander right in. It started with a voice, high-pitched, small, breaking just enough to sound desperate. "Mommy? Daddy?" I froze in the middle of the corn maze. The sound carried strangely through the rows, like it was both far away and impossibly close at the same time. The last streaks of sunset were fading, and I'd already been wandering longer than I intended. My phone had no signal. The map was useless, and I was trying not to let the nerves get the better of me. But that voice, it cut through the silence in a way that made my chest tighten. "Hello?" I called back, turning in the direction it seemed to come from. "Are you lost?" The stalks rattled faintly as I pushed forward, my flashlight beam jittering over dirt and dry leaves. The voice came again, clearer this time. "Mommy, where are you?" I found her at the bend in the path, standing perfectly still. She couldn't have been more than 6 or 7, with dark hair falling across her face, and a pale dress that looked far too thin for the October cold. Her small hands clutched the fabric at her sides, and when she looked up at me, her wide eyes shone in the light. "Are you lost?" I asked gently, trying to keep my voice calm. She nodded quickly. "I can't find my mommy and daddy. Can you help me?" The way she said it hit me right in the gut. The tremor in her voice, the way her bottom lip quivered. I didn't even hesitate. "Of course," I said. "We'll find them together. Just stay close." She smiled faintly and stepped toward me. I didn't notice then, not really, but later, when I thought back, I realized how her feet never made a sound on the dirt. We walked deeper into the maze. I tried to keep track of the turns, but the rows all looked the same. Towering stalks closing in, paths splitting in confusing directions. I asked her questions to distract both of us. "What's your name?" "Emily." "Do you know what your parents look like?" She shook her head. "I just need to find them." Her answers were short, almost rehearsed, like she didn't want to elaborate. Her eyes stayed fixed on me the whole time, wide and unblinking. I started to notice little things. The beam of my flashlight would flicker across her face, and her pupils wouldn't react. She never blinked, not once, even when I shined the light directly at her. And though she walked beside me, I couldn't hear footsteps crunching in the dirt. At first, I told myself I was imagining it, stress, nerves being lost too long. But as the minutes stretched on, unease settled in my stomach like a stone. We passed a scarecrow at one of the junctions, slumped on its stake, head tilted, button eyes staring into nothing. The girl stopped and stared at it, her expression twisting into something I couldn't place. Not fear, not sadness, something sharper. I tugged at her hand gently. "Come on, this way." Her head snapped back to me, that same wide, glassy stare, that same unbroken smile. "Okay." We walked on, but now I couldn't shake the chill running down my spine. The deeper we went, the more I felt the maze itself shifted around us. Paths that had been open were sealed off when I glanced back. The air grew heavy, thick with the smell of damp earth, and all the while, the girl never once blinked. Her feet still weren't touching the ground. I realized it then, clear as day. She wasn't walking. She was gliding. My throat went dry. I slowed my pace, putting a little distance between us, my flashlight shaking as I angled it down. Her toes hovered an inch above the dirt. No footprints, no sound. When I looked back up, she was staring at me with that same wide-eyed expression. "You'll help me find them, right?" she whispered. Her voice was different now, hollow, echoing faintly, like it came from somewhere deep in the stalks instead of her mouth. I wanted to run, but the maze had already sealed behind me. The corn leaned inward, the path tightening, as if forcing me forward with her. She smiled wider, too wide. The skin at the corners of her mouth cracked slightly, stretching and splitting. And still, she never blinked. Somewhere in the distance, I thought I heard another voice, a man calling out, a woman too, faint but real, parents searching. The girl turned toward the sound, her smile vanishing in an instant. For the first time, she looked angry. "They're not your parents," she hissed, voice layered with something deep and inhuman. "They're mine." The corn rattled violently, whispering all around me, drowning out the sound of searching voices. And when I looked back, she was gone. But the whisper of her voice lingered, sliding through the stalks, following me no matter where I turned. "You said you'd help me." I thought I'd made it out. I'd been stumbling through that corn maze for what felt like hours, turning corner after corner, doubling back, hitting dead ends, circling until my legs ached and my throat burned from breathing so hard. The paper map they'd handed out at the entrance was worthless, smudged and wrong, and my phone had no signal. But then I saw it, the faint glow of lanterns, the wooden fence marking the exit. My chest lifted with relief. I pushed forward, nearly jogging, heart thudding as I imagined the open air, the sound of traffic on the road, the laughter of families who'd already gotten out. I shoved through the last wall of stalks and froze. I was outside of the maze, but not really. The path stretched out before me, exactly as it had inside. Tall walls of corn closing in, dirt crunching beneath my boots. It looked the same, but different. The sky overhead was darker, a deep purple black that didn't match the hour. The lantern light was gone. No voices, no parking lot. The scarecrows were worse. They lined the path, one every few yards, their heads drooping, their clothes torn. At first, I thought they were the same props I'd passed before, just arranged differently. Then I noticed the stains. Dark, stiff patches splattered across their plaid shirts and overalls. Their burlap heads sagged under the weight of it, the fabric stiff and matted. Straw stuck out in clumps, damp and blackened like hair. Blood. The smell hit me next, thick, coppery, and rotten. My stomach churned, bile rising in my throat. I spun around, desperate to go back through the exit I'd just come from, but the wall of corn had already sealed shut. The stalks had woven together like a living curtain, sealing me in. Panic surged. I stumbled forward, scanning for another way out, telling myself there had to be one. That's when I heard it. A sound in the rows. Not the dry rustle of leaves. Not the sighing whisper the maze made when the wind moved through it. Running. Footsteps pounding the dirt, keeping pace with me, just on the other side of the wall. I froze, holding my breath. The sound stopped too. I took one step. Crunch. The footsteps mirrored it. One step. Crunch. My heart hammered against my ribs. I broke into a run. The path twisted and turned, scarecrows looming at every corner, their blood-stained shirts flapping faintly as if they turned toward me when I passed. My flashlight beam shook wildly, catching glimpses of burlap faces stretched too thin, button eyes hanging loose on frayed threads. Behind me, the footsteps grew louder and faster. Whatever was in the corn wasn't just following, it was chasing. I could hear it breathing now, ragged and wet, like lungs full of fluid. Every time I risked a glance over my shoulder, the rows shrugged violently, stalks snapping as something huge barreled through them, just out of sight. The scarecrows seemed closer too. Their stakes leaned in over the path, their arms no longer spread, but hanging limp, almost as if they were waiting for me. The sky above deepened into pitch black. No stars, no moon, only me, the endless walls, the scarecrows, and the thing in the rows. I don't know how long I ran. My legs ached, my lungs burned, and the footsteps never faltered. No matter how fast I went, they stayed right behind me, teasing me with their nearness. Finally, up ahead I saw another glow, a wooden arch, another exit. Relief surged through me. I pushed harder, sprinting until my chest felt like it would tear open. The arc grew closer, the promise of freedom just a few feet away. I burst through and stumbled onto the same dirt path, the same walls of corn, the same blood-stained scarecrows. Only now, the footsteps weren't in the rows anymore. They were right behind me. Corn mazes are supposed to be harmless. A fall tradition, a family attraction, a cheap thrill for teenagers who want to post spooky season pictures online. That's what I told myself when I stepped in, but that was before I found the tools. The maze was already darker than I expected. The sun had gone down faster than I thought, leaving only a weak glow on the horizon. My flashlight beam cut through a narrow path ahead, and I tried not to think about how easy it was to get turned around. The walls of corn loomed on either side, taller than me, packed tight, their tassels brushing together with every shift of air. My boots crunched in the dirt, steady and calm. Then, something broke the rhythm, a glint in the path ahead. At first, I thought it was a candy wrapper or a soda can left behind by careless kids. But when I got closer, I saw the shape of it, metal, dull and jagged. The wooden handle splintered and worn. A sickle. The blade was rusted, its edge eaten away by time. But what made my stomach clench was the smear along its curve, fresh blood, still wet. I crouched down, staring at it, my mouth going dry. A second tool lay nearby, the wood cracked, gray with age, its blade spotted with rust. Dark stains clung to its edge. Next to it, A spade with a bent shaft, caked with something that looked almost black in the beam of my flashlight. It wasn't just one tool, it was a whole pile of them. Tools that didn't belong in a corn maze. Not as props, not as decorations. They were too old, too real, and someone had used them recently. The smell hit me then, thick and metallic, clinging to the air. Blood. I stumbled back, my light swinging wildly over the path. That's when I heard it. Footsteps, slow, dragging, moving through the rows just beyond the wall of corn. The stalks shuddered as something brushed against them, deliberate and steady. Then came the sound that froze me in place. Metal against dirt. A sickle being dragged, the blade scraping with each step. I killed my light instinctively, holding my breath. The sound grew closer, the dragging footsteps keeping pace with my racing pulse. Whoever, or whatever was in the rows wasn't in a hurry. They didn't need to be. They knew I was there, and they wanted me to know they had a blade. I backed away slowly, trying to make not a sound. My foot crunched on something hard, another rusted tool hidden in the dirt. The noise echoed louder than it should have, and the dragging steps stopped. Silence. The corn around me stood still. The night pressed in. My throat tightened, my chest screaming for air I didn't dare let out. Then, with a slow inevitability, the footsteps started again. Louder now, closer. The blade scraped harder against the dirt, like it was being pressed down for me to hear. I turned and ran. The maze twisted endlessly, every corner the same. My flashlight bobbed wildly, catching glimpses of more tools scattered in the dirt. Scythes, saws, axes, some half buried, others propped against the walls. All of them rusted, all of them stained. The footsteps never faltered, always behind me, never rushing, never running, just dragging, scraping, steady as death itself. At one point I swore I saw a shadow at the end of the row. Tall, thin, shoulders hunched, one arm hanging lower than the other. The glint of metal swung loosely from its hand. I ducked into a path before I could see more. The maze felt endless. No lanterns, no laughter from other visitors, no signs of the world beyond the walls. Just me, the rusted tools, and the scrape of the blade behind me. I didn't know how long I ran before the truth hit me. This wasn't just a maze. It was a graveyard. The tools weren't abandoned. They were offerings, the leftovers of whatever had walked these rows long before me. And now it had found me. The footsteps stopped, just around the corner ahead. The scraping ceased. The silence pressed in so heavy it felt alive. And then, the whisper of steel against fabric. It was waiting. I had always thought the scariest thing about a corn maze was getting lost. Wandering in circles until your legs ache, your phone dies, and the fun turns into frustration. That was before I realized there were worse things than being lost. Much worse. The night I went, the maze wasn't busy. A few families lingered near the entrance, their kids running and laughing. But by the time I stepped in, the crowd had thinned out. The rows were quiet, tall stalks leaning inward, their tassels brushing like brittle fingers against each other. At first, it was exactly what I expected. Twists and turns, a few false exits, the usual. I kept my flashlight low, letting the beam skim across the dirt path. But after maybe 10 minutes, I saw something. A face. Just for a second, in the gap between stalks, pale, almost white, with dark eyes that seemed too large. The moment I turned my light toward it, it was gone. I told myself it was a trick of the light. Shadows, nothing more. But then I saw another one, and another. Each glimpse came with the same pattern. Pale skin, wide eyes, there and gone in a blink, retreating deeper into the stalks as soon as I looked. At first, I thought it was kids trying to scare me, actors hired to spook people. It was October after all, but there was no laughter, no footsteps, no rustling except the faint brush of leaves, just faces watching. I walked faster, my heart starting to pound. The maze felt different now, heavier, quieter, like the air itself was holding its breath. My flashlight caught shapes in my periphery, but every time I turned, the stalks were empty. Until they weren't. I came to a fork in the path and froze. 3 figures stood at at the intersection. Not faces hidden in the corn this time, not half-seen glimpses. They had stepped out into the open, pale, thin. Their clothes were colorless, ragged, blending into the shadows. Their eyes, too wide, too dark, staring unblinking into the beam of my light. None of them moved. None of them spoke. They just watched. I turned and bolted down the left path. My boots kicked up dirt, flashlight beam bouncing wildly, heart slamming against my ribs. I didn't care if I got lost. I just had to get away. But as I rounded the next corner, another one stood there, and another two after that. They weren't hiding at all. They were stepping out of the rows, slow and deliberate, as if they'd been waiting for me to move deeper before showing themselves. The deeper I went, the more there were. Dozens of them, faces pale in the darkness, bodies thin and silent, always stepping out just far enough to block the path behind me, to herd me further into the maze. The whispers started then, soft, dry, like the rustle of corn in the wind. But there was no wind. The sound came from their mouths, lips barely parting as the hushed noise grew louder, joined by more voices with every step. The maze was alive with whispers. I don't remember when I stopped running and started stumbling. My legs were lead, my breath ragged. No matter how fast I went, the watchers were always there, emerging from the stalks ahead, appearing silently at every corner. Their eyes never blinked. Their mouths never moved more than a fraction, but the whispers poured out of them, rising until it filled every inch of the maze, pressing into my skull. The corn leaned inward, narrowing the path. The phases closed in, pale shapes crowding the edges of my light. I spun in circles, desperate for an opening. And then, as if on some unseen cue, they stepped closer, out of the rows into the path, forming a wall of pale bodies, all staring at me, all whispering in perfect unison. I dropped my flashlight. The last thing I saw before the beam went out was the eyes, hundreds of them, reflecting the light like glass, and then the darkness closed in. The thing about corn mazes is they're supposed to be safe, harmless, maybe a little spooky, maybe frustrating, but at the end of the day, you come out laughing, take a picture with a pumpkin, and go home. At least, that's what I thought before I stepped into the flooded section. I'd already been wandering longer than I meant to. My paper map was crumpled in my pocket, useless, and my flashlight beam was the only thing guiding me through the narrow dirt paths. The air had grown damp, colder, carrying the heavy smell of earth and rot. When I turned the corner, I stopped dead. The path ahead glistened under the light, reflecting silver, water. It stretched as far as my beam could reach, filling the row from side to side. I thought maybe it was just heavy rain runoff, but when I stepped closer, the smell hit me, stagnant, sour, like something had been rotting beneath the surface. I tested it with the toe of my boot. Ripples spread outward in the murky darkness. The water was shockingly cold, seeping through the fabric almost immediately. I sighed and pressed forward. What choice did I have? The water rose to my ankles, then halfway up my calves. Each step sent up little splashes, the sound unnervingly loud in the still night. The rows of corn loomed on either side, their leaves damp, bending low as if listening. The deeper I went, the worse it smelled. The surface shimmered with a greasy film, reflecting my light in strange, warped patterns. Something brushed against my leg once, soft and slimy. I told myself it was just a weed, a stalk bent under the water. But then, I looked down and froze. Hands, pale human hands, pressed against the surface from below, their fingers splayed wide, dozens of them. Their skin looked gray, swollen, the nails blackened. At first, they were still, and I thought maybe I was seeing things, just reflections, tricks of the water. But then, the fingers moved. They curled and stretched, reaching upwards, scraping at my boots, sliding along my ankles. Cold pressure brushed my skin through the fabric. I stumbled back, splashing wildly, my light jerking across the water. For a moment, the ripples hid them, but when it settled, the hands were closer, and there were more of them. I tried to run, slogging through the heavy water, every step a struggle. The hands followed, rushing higher, clutching at my calves, pulling at the soles of my boots. I nearly went down when something closed around my ankle with real force, icy and unrelenting, fingers digging like iron. I kicked hard, thrashing, and grip slipped free. But when I looked down again, a face was breaking the surface, bloated pale, its eyes clouded white, its mouth gaping in a silent scream. Water poured from beneath its teeth as it lunged upward, arms stretching to grab me. I screamed and stumbled forward, crashing into the stalks. The corn bent, but didn't break, slapping me back into the flooded path. The water surged higher, chest deep now, though I hadn't moved downhill. It was rising, swallowing the maze. The hands clawed at me from all sides. Faces bobbed in the murk. Dozens of them, men, women, children, their mouths gasping silently, their skin off in strips. They didn't float. They rose only when I looked, as if the water itself was bringing them down. The whispers began then, bubbling up with each face, a chorus of voices gurgling through waterlogged throats. "Stay with us, don't leave, join us." I don't know how I made it out. I just remember thrashing, kicking, forcing my body forward, until suddenly the water was gone. One step, it was at my chest. The next, it was gone completely. The dirt path dry, my boots squelching as if nothing had happened. Behind me, the road was silent. No water, no faces. But my legs were wet. My clothes clung to me, dripping. And when I glanced down, pale fingerprints were pressed into the skin of my ankles, already bruising. They closed the maze at sundown for a reason. Everyone in town knows it. The sign at the entrance says in big red letters, "No entry after dark." Staff repeats it every fall, warning families as they leave, locking the gates behind them. It isn't subtle. But we were stupid teenagers, and stupid teenagers think rules are just invitations. So when someone suggested sneaking into the maze at midnight, we all laughed and said yes, before anyone had the chance to think about it. The maze didn't feel the same after hours. I've been through it during the day. Bright sun, kids laughing, staff in orange vests wandering around to help if you got lost. The stalks had felt tall then, but now they seemed impossibly high, blotting out the sky. The dirt paths were darker, the air colder, carrying the smell of damp earth and something else, something faintly sour, like wet hay left to rot. Josh, always the loud one, joked that the staff probably rigged the maze with haunted house props to keep people out after dark, but even he kept his voice lower than usual, as if the corn itself was listening. Our lights made weak tunnels in the darkness, and the rows swallowed everything beyond the beams. We tried to stick close, but every crunch of our boots seemed too loud, echoing strangely. It wasn't long before we realized something was off. The maze didn't match what we remembered. Paths that should have looped back curved away into nowhere. Long, straight sections twisted when they shouldn't have. Corn leaned over the dirt in odd angles, hemming us in. The map in my pocket might as well have been a blank sheet of paper. It was Emily who said it first in a nervous whisper. "This isn't the same maze." We walked deeper, trying not to admit the truth. It was supposed to be fun, trespassing, a thrill, nothing more. But then, we found the clearing, the Scarecrow. It stood on its wooden cross in the middle of the space, arms outstretched, head slumped. We'd seen it before in daylight, a dumb prop in a flannel and jeans, a burlap face with buttons for eyes. Only now, it wasn't burlap. The face was gray, flesh stretched taut over bone, lips cracked and split. The eyes were open, milky, half-clouded, glinting in our flashlight beams, like glass. For a long time, none of us said anything. We just stood there, staring, our breath visible in the cold air. That's a prop, right?" Ryan's voice cracked. Nobody answered, because just then the head moved, slow and subtle, but enough for us to see the pale eyes lift, enough for the slack jaw to creak open with a low, wet rasp of breath. Panic hit like lightning. Claire screamed first. Emily grabbed her arm and bolted, dragging her into the corn. Josh swore loudly and shoved past me, Ryan stumbling after him. In seconds, we were all running, splitting in different directions. I don't remember which path I took, only the sound of crashing stalks, my own ragged breathing, my light bouncing wildly over the dirt. Behind me came the sound of rope creaking, of wood groaning, and then footsteps, slow dragging as though something heavy had just stepped down from its post and was learning to walk again. I caught up with Ryan first. He was standing at an intersection, turning in frantic circles. His flashlight beam shook so hard, it barely lit anything. "Where are the girls?" I asked, chest heaving. He just shook his head, his mouth open and closed, but no sound came out. His face was pale, eyes wide. That's when we heard it again. The footsteps, closer now, steady, deliberate. The sound of something heavy dragging itself forward, one step at a time. We ran. The maze twisted endlessly, each turn leading deeper, never closer to the edge. More than once we swore we heard Claire screaming or Emily calling for help, but every time we tried to follow, the paths turned us around, splitting us back into unfamiliar rows, and always, somewhere behind us, the footsteps followed. Eventually, Ryan and I stumbled into another clearing. For a moment I thought we'd found the exit, but then my light landed right on it. The Scarecrow. Again, standing tall, arms spread wide, its gray face tilted as though listening. Its milky eyes caught the light and gleamed. "Run!" I yelled. But Ryan didn't move. He just stood there, staring, his body rigid. His light shook in his hand, but he didn't lift his feet. The Scarecrow's head tilted further, its jaw cracked open. That rasping breath came again, and Ryan walked toward it. I swear, he didn't want to. His face twisted in terror, his legs shuddering with each step, but something pulled him, something invisible dragging him forward, as though his body was no longer his. He reached the Scarecrow, stopped in front of it, and then his flashlight hit the dirt. When I picked it up and shone the beam forward, Ryan was gone. The Scarecrow stood there alone, its head slumped forward again, straw leaking from the holes in its chest. I don't know how much longer I ran after that. The maze shifted around me, the stalks seeming taller, the paths tighter. My battery was almost dead, the light flickering when I revealed the truth. Every path was leading me back to the center, back to him. The last thing I saw before my light went out was the Scarecrow again, closer this time. Its arms no longer tied. It was waiting for me, and I finally understood why the maze closed at sundown, because once midnight comes, the Scarecrow walks, and it doesn't ever let you leave. It should have been so simple. Walk into the corn maze, follow the map, laugh about getting turned around a few times, and then head out for cider and donuts. That was the plan. But that was hours ago. Now the only thing I know for certain is this. I've been walking forever, and the maze doesn't want me to leave. At first I thought I was just lost. It happens in corn mazes all the time. The rows look the same, the turns blur together, and before long you're convinced you've been down the same path a dozen times. But then I saw the lantern. The first time it startled me. A clearing opened up suddenly in front of me, the dirt path spilling into a wide circle. In the center, resting neatly on the ground, was a single lantern. It was old-fashioned, the kind with a glass globe and a metal handle. Its flame burned steady and bright, though I hadn't seen anyone light it. I thought maybe it was part of the maze, some decoration, or maybe a guidepost meant to reassure people who got too turned around. I didn't linger. I just kept walking. But when I turned down another path, then another, I ended up back in the same clearing, same lantern, same steady flame. That's when I knew something was wrong. I tried everything. I ran straight for as long as the path would allow, never turning. I dragged my hand along the left wall, following it endlessly. I even broke through the stalks once, forcing my way between them. But no matter what I did, I ended up back at that clearing, back with the lantern. And every time I returned, it seemed a little brighter. The flame burned a little higher, the glow reaching further into the surrounding corn. The first time I didn't feel anything. The second time, I felt uneasy. The third time, I felt tired. By the fifth time, I caught myself staring at it too long, the warm glow pulling at me like gravity. The thought slipped, uninvited, into my mind. I could just sit for a while, rest warm myself by the light. I shook it off and kept walking, but the thought didn't leave. Hours passed, or what felt like hours. My phone had died, my flashlight flickered weakly, and the cold night air cut deeper with every breath. My legs ached, my throat was dry, and my head throbbed with exhaustion. Every turn, every path, every desperate sprint brought me back to the same place, the same dirt circle, the same lantern, and the urge grew stronger. It wasn't just exhaustion. It wasn't just my body begging for rest. It was something else, something in the flame itself, whispering without words, a warmth that promised comfort, an invitation that promised safety. Sit, stay, stop fighting. I found myself slowing as I approached the clearing, my eyes fixed on the glow. The air felt warmer there, softer, as if the light could melt away all the cold and fear that had been gnawing at me. For the first time since I entered the maze, I wanted to stop moving. I don't know how long I stood there, staring at it. Seconds, minutes, hours. The world outside the clearing seemed to fall away. The maze, the night, even the cold, they all faded until there was only the lantern, steady and bright, its glow pulsing gently, like a heartbeat. And then, I noticed something I hadn't before. Shadows. Figures sitting cross-legged around the lantern, barely visible at the edges of its glow. Dozens of them, silent, still, their outlines blurred and hazy, their heads bowed as if in prayer. I blinked and they vanished, but the ground where they'd sat was worn smooth, packed down as though many people had spent a long time there. The whisper in my head grew louder. Sit, stay, never leave. I'm writing this now, though I don't know how much longer I can resist. My legs don't want to walk anymore. My eyes keep drifting to the flame. The lantern's glow feels alive, tugging me closer, promising that if I just give in, the maze will finally stop. I've been walking forever, and maybe it's time to rest. Maybe that's what everyone else thought too. Maybe that's why their shadows are still here.